This is the Horse Radio Network.
This is episode 72 of Horsemanship Radio, brought to you by Index Fund Advisors, IFA.com. Horsemanship Radio is a part of the family of the Horse Radio Network. And today we have two scientists, sort of. One is a legitimate Dr. Veronica Fowler, and Monty Roberts, who also has been known to participate in a science trial. This is Debbie Laux, and you're listening to the Horsemanship Radio. Thank you for joining us. Horsemanship Radio airs on the 1st and the 15th of the month. And I have my producer, Jen, with me today. Hi, Jen.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad you're here to be with this one because Veronica is a lot of fun, and she's a gal in a horse business, but completely different than what you and I usually get to talk to. And she has that cute little English accent. Isn't that fun?
She had lovely little to her voice and very science-weeny, which I love.
Yes, very much. She's geeky that way. And I love that about her too, because she's always thinking. But she loves her horses. She has thoroughbreds and she has little kids. And she's just really in that really busy part of her life. And it's a lot of fun. And I thought, well, she and Monty did a science trial together a few years back, and it was published in this journal, a scientific journal called Anthrozoos. And, you know, it's really in the geekyville, you know, it really is in not what us horse people would just pick up and read, you know, on waiting for the doctor at the doctor's office, right? No.
This is not one you're going to find under the front seat of the pickup truck. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Not found too many places, but with Mr. Google, you can find it, Anthrozoos. But the fascinating thing was, it was like these two came together after Veronica had taken some courses, some join-up courses and some introductory courses over in England. She said, golly, why, you know, I write equine science papers. Why isn't there something about join-up that's quantified, you know? Yeah, good science work, quantified. And Dad said, well, make it happen. And darned if they didn't. So it's really interesting. You're not going to believe how much goes into these things. It's really interesting.
There's a reason not everybody does science trials.
Yeah.
They're really hard to do.
They're hard to do. They're expensive. And it's hard to corral people long enough to get results that, you know, are juried and all. It's an amazing backflip, you know, just, and it's expensive. It's all those things. And you have to be so careful about, you can't even like run out and get a bunch of sponsors because then like, oh, are they invested in, you know, is it going to be skewed, you know, all these things. It's just crazy, but they prevailed. They're patient people. And they used, well, you'll hear some of this. I don't want to give too much away. But
all the good stuff. No spoilers.
No, I'm just so excited to talk about it. But it was really fun. I think people are going to enjoy it. So shall we get them started?
Get them started.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Mark Hebner, president of Index Fund Advisors and proud owner of Monty Roberts Willing Partners graduate. He's a sugar bear. You know, investment portfolios are a lot like horses. You need to find one that best suits you, your temperament, and your stage of life. Some people might like an energetic horse and an aggressive investment portfolio, while others are more comfortable with a gentle ride and a more conservative investment portfolio. The trick is to find the one that's right for you. That's what Index Fund Advisors is all about, matching people with portfolios. Risk-appropriate, low-cost, and globally diversified investment portfolios. You can find the right portfolio for you by taking the Risk Capacity Survey at IFA.com. That's IFA as an Index Fund Advisors. Or you can call us toll-free at 888-643-3133. That's 888-643-3133.
Well, Dr. Veronica Fowler possesses a BSc, which is in animal science. That's those, you know, terms that they give to doctors, and an MSc in equine science and a PhD in virology. Veronica has held scientific roles both at the veterinary institutes and non-government organizations as well, like the Brook, which are involved in animal welfare and veterinary business, livestock, and equines. She has developed and she keeps creating better ways to deal with her horses and her animals based in science. And she goes off to developing countries as well. So currently, Veronica is in the applied diagnostics research business, and her research is concentrating on epidemiology and the development of simple, rapid, point-of-care diagnostics for the detection of diseases affecting farm animals like cattle, pigs, sheep, goats, and of course, horses. Veronica undertakes capacity development in a number of developing countries, providing training to local authorities, veterinarians, and livestock owners on how they can take action to control and prevent infectious animal diseases. We're just lucky to have her. Well, welcome, Dr. Fowler. Hi, Veronica. How are you?
Hi, Debbie. I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for staying up late over in the UK so that we get some of your knowledge.
No problem.
Well, you're an interesting one because you have gone so long studying from the science side of it, horses and people too. And obviously horses are fine. It's the people we're really working on. And I've been remiss in getting you on to talk about this fantastic mounting of a science trial that you did back in 2012. And I wanted to share you with our audience and let people know a little bit about what goes on to produce a science trial, why you did it, and then ultimately how it was published. And we won't go into a whole dissertation here because I know you can do one of those things, right?
Yeah, I have 3 to my name.
There we are. Hence Dr. Veronica Fowler. I would like to just explain to people that science and horses don't necessarily live in 2 different worlds. And I think, if you agree with me, that the worlds are coming closer together. Is that right?
Yep, I would agree with you.
That's nice. It's nice in that, I think we can start to get some consistency in training if everybody is able to share information. And I think that's what you guys set out to do with this science trial.
Yep, that's really the key. That's one of the motivating factors behind the study when we did it.
Good. And people should know that you're a horsewoman as well.
I am. I've had many horses to my name. At the moment, I still have 4, but I'm always collecting.
A woman after our own heart. All the
And
listeners
who doesn't
sigh.
collect an occasional horse, right?
Oh, very occasionally.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And you have a business now that still involves horses, am I right?
Yes, I still help people with behavioural issues with their horse and sort of communicating science advancements to the general public, essentially, so that everybody has access to important information and it's just not held solely within the scientific field.
Well, that just warms my heart and Dad's as well, Monty Roberts, because, I think everybody knows that knows his techniques, that he often says, my way is, the best way today for me. But if you show me a better way, that'll be my way tomorrow. And and he kind of winks when he says it, but he really means it. And he gives credit to those that have done it before. So how did you meet Monty the first time? Why did you have a relationship first with horses?
Well, interestingly, I actually met Monty through Kelly, and it was quite funny because as a scientist, I'm always, motivated to learn more, as is Monty actually. And I came across Kelly in that she runs some courses in the UK.
Kelly Marks.
Kelly Marks as an accredited Monty Roberts horse trainer. Right. And she ran a course called Horse Psychology. And I thought, you know what, that's exactly for me. I really want to go and find out what Kelly Marks has to say about horse psychology. Mm. And I went with a little bit of skepticism because, you have this split between what we might describe as a cowboy or, an actual pure horse trainer and what we might describe as an academic. And I probably sit in the middle of the fence, but probably slightly more towards the academic side. So I was really keen to learn what she had to say about horse psychology. And I went on the course, and at the end of it, and I thought, oh my God, she actually knows what she's talking about. And and it was through her that I, was able to learn a little bit more about Monty. Obviously, most of his work he has a huge following all around the world, but I think it's obviously greater in the US than it is in the UK. And so, through the channel of Kelly, I managed to have the pleasure of meeting him. And it was in early discussions with him where he asked me, what's the problem with in the academic world with understanding what we do as, practical horse trainers. And I was like, well, really what the issue is lack of communication between what might be seen as two sort of silos. Where, each and every one in those silos is working for the same goal, but they don't work together and they don't exchange information. And, some of the things that have been published within the equine scientific world have been great. And we've learned so much about training techniques which can lead to confusion and abuse in horses. And we know so much more from those studies. And they're generally objective, they're well balanced, and they have a base on analysis of specific data that was collected during dedicated studies. But then we find the articles that are, describing the use of the round pen training with conclusions drawn on the use of this method. And I at the time found it quite surprising that it's quite common to find sentences such as round pen training induces fear and provokes the flight response. This is a dangerous training method because horses can make associations between a fearful state and an aggressor. And it allows a horse to add the flight response to its interaction with humans. Now, it's quite interesting in that those words themselves have a lot of meaning behind them. And there's interpretation that's been put on training techniques, such as, to use the word fearful implies that the horse is fearful. To use the word aggressor implies that that person who's in the middle of the round pen has gone in with the intention of being an aggressor, and that when the horse is moving away, that is the flight response. So I find those three words in themselves very interesting. But unfortunately, there's huge flaws in publishing things like that, in that I'm yet to see a published article which conclusively shows that horses being trained within a round pen environment are overtly fearful, they perceive the person in the middle of the round pen as an aggressor, and that training undertaken with these environments is less effective. Now that's the justification in a lot of scientific papers as to why round pen training shouldn't be used. So really that was kind of my main motivation with my first interactions with Monty, is that, hang on, Monty's getting quite a lot of unfair press where very strong emotional words are being used, but actually they have no scientific basis to base them on. So you
set out to study then that on the surface first, it was just about round penning and the fairness or unfairness of it.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I had no standpoint. I don't sit on a Monty fence. I don't sit on a conventional horse training fence. I'm completely your traditional scientist, which is motivated to test a hypothesis. And with the equine science background that I've got, I'm interested in generating data that we can use objectively to improve human-horse interactions. So I thought, it's going to take a long time to convince Monty to even listen to a scientist. And then secondly, allow a scientist to actually measure the response of horses to his training.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, Veronica. So one of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking about that is what is said to be the stressors of the training? What is actually being claimed to be a stressor in the training?
Well, it's probably a good idea that I describe really what they're talking about when they refer to a stressor. So a stressor, as defined, can be anything that's an environmental condition or an external stimulus or even a chemical or like biological agent which results in the activation of the stress response.
Wow.
And so if you can imagine, every day a horse basically encounters a range of stressors, even when untouched. And so things like certain noises and movement are essentially an environmental stressor.
Mm-hmm.
And every time that we interact with a horse, we expose the horse to further stressors, such as things like tack, riders, food. Even food can be a stressor. So, but the thing is about horses is that they are amazingly well adapted to environmental stressors. And this is one of the reasons why we're able to domesticate horses.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you look at one of the reasons as to one of the characteristics that an animal must have in order to be adaptable to domestication, one of them is essentially an adaptability to environmental stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
And what they kind of mean by that is anything that might cause stress.
Right.
So, but, having said that, we do know, based on published studies, that the application of a first saddle and a first rider, for example, are significant stressors for a horse.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to look at, a normal training session and things that you might be doing in the initial training of a horse, or even remedial training for, horses that have unwanted behaviours, two of the most significant things that you can do with a horse are, one, to put a saddle on its back, and secondly, to then put a rider.
Yeah, it's so unnatural, right? I mean, it's just counter to their nature.
Yeah, and then in addition to that, things like forced backward movements, and lunging. I mean, those two are particularly considered quite stressful. And and really where they get, that's been defined in science, is that they're looking for things like increase in heart rate and a reduction in heart rate variability. So you can monitor some physiological parameters which help you define whether the horse is perceiving that as hard work or a significant stressor.
Okay, so can we make a distinction then between a heart rate that's going up because they're exercising and then a heart rate that goes up? Is this a cortisol level that you're testing or something, or what? How do you describe a stressor that could just be exercise induced?
So that's an interesting question. And with heart rate alone, you can't do that. So you can't really remove heart rate from physical activity.
Right.
It's impossible. But so we can look at things, another parameter that's called heart rate variability, and that is affected by a range of different factors, including exercise. However, at sort of low to moderate exercise intensities, we can use heart rate variability to be able to define which part of the nervous system is controlling the heart rate.
So you have some sort of baseline to go from. You create.
So we can look at we take the heart rate variability and then we manipulate the data in a way that allows us to look at it from is the heart rate being influenced by your sympathetic nervous response, which is your increase in your flight response, if you like, or we can say, is it being controlled by the parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest, I think Monty says, or is it a combination of both, because they don't always work independently of one another. So we do have clever little ways of analysing data, but you're absolutely right in that when we do analyse this data, we have to look at it in a very objective way, which allows for all the other variables which can influence that data to affect that data, essentially.
Okay. So for the layman here, for the person who just trains horses, let's call it that, not a scientist, I think it's interesting to note that round penning, if we want to call it that, before we get too involved in, what's stressing the horse and everything, goes back to like Greco-Roman time, doesn't it? I mean, This is working a horse in a round pen has been going on forever. I know it's kind of a new concept if you grew up in sort of the traditional world 100 years ago, coming out of the military. Maybe they didn't use round pens so much, but it really is an old method. But what's the difference between somebody who says, hey, I go out in a square arena or a rectangular and I lunge my horse versus running around other than tethered? What is the difference between what somebody would consider kind of scary to go around in a round pen versus lunging?
Well, that's quite interesting. And I mean, there hasn't been studies that have specifically used the same horses. and studied their response during lunging and also within a round pen, whether or not they're, being used for join up at the time or whether they're just, free exercising in a round pen.
Yeah.
But my own personal view about it is that when you have a horse in a round pen, you give it at least one choice. And that choice is, you can, if I put a bit of pressure on you, you can move away from me. That's a choice.
Mm-hmm.
But the nice thing about a round pen as well is that there is some evidence, published evidence, to suggest that the fear response, and this is also true for humans, is that you can control the activation of a fear response by exercise.
Okay.
So if you're exercising, you're less likely to get to the same level of what your fear response would be in any given situation if you're exercising. Now, so the horse has free movement. It's essentially not anchored by a point, which lunging does. You anchor the horse.
Mm-hmm.
So you're pulling it and you're pushing it at the same time. So you're potentially giving it conflicting cues, which we already know is can create confusion in a horse.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're pulling on it, I mean, I've watched 100 million people lunge horses, and you look at every one of them and you think, my God, what are you doing? And what they essentially train their horse to do is to stand and look at them. And so essentially it can be, not in all cases, but it can be an application of two conflicting cues, which you do not get in the round pen because you haven't got hold of the horse's head. And if you say, please move away from me, the horse says, oh yes, I can do that, and off it goes. Whereas in lunging, you can say, well, I want you to go forward, but not that fast.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you're pulling the horse back by its head.
Right.
Also, I think the size of the circle, although you might go out with the best intentions of lunging your horse on the longest line, those longest lines are probably still not as long as to create the diameter that you would get in a round pen.
Right.
The horse can essentially in a round pen choose its pace. Monty's not chasing it with a lunge whip. He's not making contact necessarily. Well, he certainly doesn't use a whip and make contact in a round pen. Right. He might encourage forward movement by the use of a long line or whatever.
Tossing the long line, the cotton long line,
But even when he makes contact, if he makes contact with that horse, it's a gentle, that's on your bum and now it's off your bum. So it's not there to strike to cause pain.
Yeah.
It's there as a cue to move forward. Whereas a lunge whip, the pure cracking of the lunge whip. So you're giving, not only are you giving a visual cue, you're giving an audio cue as well. And we know in the horse world that the degree to which a horse responds to any given stressor is elevated the more cues that are associated with it. So if it's just a visual cue and it doesn't move, that's okay. If it's a visual cue but it also moves, well, that's not so okay. And then if it's a visual cue which moves and it makes a noise, well, you can forget about it. If you think about a whip, it moves, it's visual, and it makes a noise.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
You're giving the horse the worst of all possible scenarios. Whereas encouraging a horse forward with your body language as well as perhaps using the swishing of a rope behind it, you still don't have any of the audio cues.
So rather than a stressor, you're really just driving the horse forward with your body language. That makes sense.
But you see, it is quite interesting because there have been studies published on lunging, and actually the one that I think we're going to talk about in a minute, we had components of lunging within that study. And because obviously the UK conventional technique, which we studied alongside Monty, uses lunging. It's a typical method that's used in British Horse Society training.
Yes. So let's get into that a little bit. So this study was done 2012. It was eventually published in Anthrozoos, which is a respected, how would you title that? Animal-centric scientific journal. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's basically a journal that sort of reports studies that have been done on animal and human interactions. So it's not just restricted to horses. So it's any animal and human interaction.
Yeah, which is really interesting that there are these journals out there, and they're not easy. I mean, you've had two other scientists working with you on it. We should name them too. So it's Dr.
Yep.
Veronica Fowler and Mark.
It was Dr. David Marlin, who's a world leading expert on equine exercise physiology. Mm-hmm. And we also had Dr. Mark Kennedy, who's a world leading expert in animal welfare.
Right. So you all are quite learned and quite experienced at all that. So you've got those guys behind it, which is probably why Anthrozoos paid attention to this study. and I think it's so interesting to hear how the horses were chosen too. I think people would really love to hear. So how do you just pull horse names out of a top hat, or how did you do it?
One of the first things, which is quite tricky to do, is to find horse owners who are willing to share their precious animals with you. But we were very lucky, and we did manage to find 14 untrained horses from a variety of places in the UK, and they comprised 4 mares and 10 geldings. And what was lovely is we had a mix of breeds, but we had a close age group, so all of our horses were between 3 and 5 years of age. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, that was a lovely grouping of horses to be able to have access to and have permission from their owners.
So all unstarted, all fairly young, all, I suppose you had to make sure that they were all healthy and nobody's lame, nobody's lactating, none of this stuff.
No, that's right. every single horse was checked, and they were all fit and well as per independent veterinary checks. And what was lovely is that we were able to ensure that those horses had never experienced their initial training other than they were happy to accept a head collar and to be led and to have minimal contact. So such as, they would allow you to pick their feet up, you could groom them. But apart from that, they were pretty much untouched, which was lovely. Mm-hmm. So in order to because one of the key things when it comes to a scientific study is that everybody wants a group of horses that are identical. So you want all boys, you want all this breed, you want all this same age, born on exactly the same day. But obviously in life that doesn't happen. And actually, when you're going out and you're starting horses for the first time, they're every single different breed you can imagine. So we did have a mix of mares and we did have a mix of geldings, and we had a complete mix of breeds. And so we know that breed, for example, and age and sex can affect horse behaviour, as it does with people, with humans. And so it was quite important, given that we had what I would describe as a normal population of horses, what you might expect to be coming into any, horse trainer's yard for initial training. We wanted to make sure that it was a fair allocation of horses to each trainer. Mm-hmm. So prior to the study, the horses arrived it was 2 to 3 days in advance of the study, and one that was allow them to habituate to their environment, because as I said earlier, anything can be considered a stressor to a horse. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to make sure that the stable they were in and the arena that they were going to be trained in, that being just the indoor arena, was not going to contribute to their response. So that we wanted to basically be specifically measuring the response to the training that was going on rather than the environment. So what we did, which was quite interesting, is we allowed Monty and the other trainer, who's Phil Rolith, who I think we're going to talk about in a minute, to view the horses. So as they arrived, they were settled for a couple of days, and then they were brought into the arena, and we did a combination of very simple tests with them. One was a handling test. So the horse was led around the outside of the arena, and each trainer scored that horse on using a very stringent classification of scores on the ease of handling, basically. So how difficult was that horse to handle going around the outside of the arena? Based on that, both trainers worked together to pair the horses. So they picked, pairs of horses that had a similar handleability, if you like.
Behavior, kind of.
A similar response to being handled in an indoor arena, basically.
That's fair, yeah.
And then, so to make it doubly fair, we then took those pairs of horses that were paired by the trainers, and we then exposed them to a novel object test. And which is essentially to look at how a horse responds when it's startled by something.
Okay.
And in this case, we used an umbrella.
Oh, that's good. I was going to ask you if somebody jumped out behind a chair or something.
No, it was an umbrella. But so each horse was asked to individually walk up to the front of the umbrella, and then we would raise the umbrella, and we opened it in a split second and then closed it. And the response of each horse was scored again.
Ah.
And then those responses were statistically analysed to make sure that there was no difference in the pairing of each horse. And then those horses were then randomly allocated to the trainer. So at no point did each one of those trainers know which horse they were getting. So it was at the end. So it was in their interests to be extremely fair in the way that they graded those horses through that process.
That's great. So, it's kind of like when we were kids, if we had to split something like a piece of cake or something, one would get to split it and one would have to pick it. So you have to be fair, right?
That's exactly right. That's essentially what we were doing here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So now tell us about the trainers. We know Monty Roberts, and he's just this cowboy from California, right? So you got a wild, wild west guy. And then tell us about Phil Rowlett.
Yeah, so Phil Rowlett, he was our UK conventional trainer, and he essentially represented the British Horse Society conventional training technique, which has got quite a large following in this country. And historically, it's been a huge sort of society that people have joined if they've had horses from even a young age right up until, way beyond, I don't know what age, but anyway, it's got a huge following in this country. And it's kind of the traditional way that horses have been trained, probably largely, as you said earlier, come down from the army and how the army did it. And then we've developed a horse society from that.
100 years old? How old would it be, this British Horse Society?
Well, I think it's 85 years old, if I'm right, because I believe that it's probably a bit older now. So in 2014, I think it was the 85th year. And I remember it because the British Horse Society has a section within it called the Pony Club, which is for its young members.
Right.
And in its 85th anniversary, it was the largest youth equestrian organisation in the world.
Goodness. Yeah. So we're really coming from a traditional world when we talk about the trainer in Phil. All right. And so, and the study is conducted within a university setting, as I recall, college.
Yes, it was an agricultural college. It was Sparsholt Agricultural College, which is in Hampshire. And the horses were stabled we were there for 3 weeks, but we were 3 weeks training, but we were there for probably a month. The horses were stabled in an American barn. It's a lovely setup there. The stables are beautiful. The yard facilities are amazing. And we had sole access. So all of our horses were the only horses on the yard. And we had access to a huge indoor arena, which is where all of the training took place. So it was very secluded, which in itself is an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, because how often do you get that set up? It sounds almost like you threaded a needle in history to get all the right horses in all the right setup in all the right places. And it's amazing. And you go into the heart rates, and we don't have time to go into all of that, but essentially, I mean, you got us hanging on the ends of our seats. What was the culmination?
What happened?
Yeah, what happened?
Well, so after 3 weeks of training, so each trainer had to declare what they were going to do at the beginning of the study. They weren't allowed to deviate from that. So equipment and methods were described, and they were submitted to an ethics committee, which was independent from the study, which was approved.
Wow.
They were allowed to train their horses for 3 weeks. And then at the end of the 3 weeks, they were assessed in terms of ridden performance, and that was in a ridden flat work test as well as a ridden obstacle test.
Okay.
And so the results essentially were derived from that. So we had heart rate, and then we had technical performance at the end of 3 weeks. And the key findings were that during first saddle and first rider, which I've already described to you, as we know in the literature that these are key stressors, Monty's horses had significantly lower maximum heart rates when compared to the conventionally trained horses.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, Monty also had lower average and minimum heart rates than the conventionally trained horse. Now, what's really interesting is that there is nowhere in the literature that I can find as yet which has shown that the heart rate during the application of the first rider is lower than the entire 3 weeks of training and including putting the saddle on the horse for the first time. So some of Monty's lowest heart rates were actually achieved when the horse experienced its first rider. Now, I think that's quite significant, and that's never been observed in the literature where initial training of horses has been studied previously.
So it goes completely counter to what the popular notion is about
it
stress.
does. I mean, what you would expect if you believed, the response to be as predicted by what's described in the literature is that you would put the first saddle on, that would result in an increase in heart rate, and then you put the rider on and the heart rate goes up even further. Well, we actually saw the opposite. So Monty's heart rates during the first saddle were 127 beats per minute.
Okay.
And then when he put the rider on, it went down to 76 beats per minute.
Oh my goodness. You'd think that extra weight, that extra predator on his back, if you want to use horse language, would increase that. So in this study, do you extrapolate why you think that is, or do you just report?
Well, we haven't made too many interpretations of the data other than to simply state what they are.
Okay.
Because it's difficult to know because we only measured heart rate in this particular study as well as technical performance. In order to understand that more fully, it would we could look at other parameters such as cortisol and heart rate variability.
More scientific, but you said performance. So there was these final days. How did that? So you had a trek. You had a little obstacle course or something you had to go through.
We did. So So what we essentially did was we asked the trainers to present their horses on two final days. One was to present the horses for a ridden flat work test, which was essentially a very basic dressage test.
Okay.
Not involving any technical moves at all. It was, trot a circle, walk a straight line, those sorts of very low level dressage training. And the second day was a ridden obstacle course where there was, a jump to do. The horses had to walk through various different obstacles. They had to go through cones. They had to back up. It was really manoeuvring the horses' feet around the arena, but with the use of obstacles over tarpaulin, those sorts of things. And that was all video recorded, and it was scored by judges who had absolutely no idea what we were doing. They had no clue that the study was going on. They watched the video of each trainer, and they were simply asked to describe the way the horse performed based on a very stringent criteria of
how many days training at that point?
This was 20 days training. So it was 20 days training, yeah. And so they
rides. Not even 20 rides, because how many rides would that be? Because you started off groundwork first because they never had a saddle on, or did?
Well, that in itself is quite interesting, because during the first 7 days, Monty had joined up his horses on at least 4 occasions. He had saddled, bridled, long-lined, and ridden all of them. So obviously not himself. This was his associate,
he had a rider,
which was Jared. And which also made it easier for the video to be scored independently, because nobody knew who Jared was. They didn't know that they were Monty Roberts trained horses, and the judges had no idea who Phil was. So although he rode his own horses, nobody knew who he was. They didn't know the purpose of the study. They were just purely asked to describe on technical performance.
Interesting.
So it's interesting. So Monty had actually managed to ride his horses, and in the first 7 days he was out of the round pen and he was freely riding them in the indoor arena. Whereas the conventionally trained horses, they had been saddled, they had been bridled, and they had been lunged, but not all of them had been ridden in the first 7 days. And that probably reflects in the final test days, in that there was 2 horses that they weren't presented for the final test because they essentially hadn't reached a stage at which the trainer felt that it would be safe to undertake the test.
Now, those were Monty's horses or Phil's horses?
No, these were conventionally trained horses.
Okay.
So Monty presented all of his horses. Every single one of them did the ridden test, and every single one of them did the obstacle test. Whereas Phil's horses, he had 2 that didn't do the obstacle test because he felt it would be too dangerous, and 1 that didn't do the ridden test just because he hadn't had enough time using his methods to be able to get those particular horses to a stage at which he felt it would be safe and fair on the horse to do the test. So
it sounds like, at least in this group, in this controlled environment, if you were to choose which training method you would want to use on your baby, your 4-year-old horse, what would you use? Fair question.
Well, you're making me get off my fence now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, stay fair. Never mind. I'll ask Jen.
This is very interesting for me to listen to because having been a Pony Club member for many a year and a graduate, I am very, very familiar with what is being referred to in this conversation as the traditional method.
Yeah.
And like any training method, when used by a human, you can do it well or you could do it poorly. But even when it is done extremely well, it lacks the same effectiveness and the same universality that the language of Equus does, in that some of those horses flunk out. They basically flunked out. They didn't get to the end to take the test. They flunked out of school. Whereas using the language of Equus, none of the horses flunked out. Every single one of them passed the course, and they didn't have to grade on a curve.
Yeah,
that says a lot to me, in that by using the horses' innate language, we are literally setting them up for success, and providing that the human holds up their end of the bargain, you're going to have 100% success.
I love it.
That's right. And another thing, I mean, it's interesting that you've put that in the context of horses, but it's exactly the same with children. If you enforce a one style only teaching, you will find exactly what you described. Some will succeed, some will drop out. And, you know, the British Horse Society's method, and it's had to be this way because this was how army horses were trained, is that it's very rigid. You know, there is very little flexibility. Everything is done the same, and you roll this horse in and then the next one comes in. And the only difference with the British Horse Society is that you have more time if you want to consider it that way. Whereas Monty's method, it's got a lot more flexibility. You can apply it on an individual horse basis. You're learning more about that horse as you go through the process, in that you're observing its response, you're evaluating what you're doing at every step, rather than just following protocol.
Yeah.
And so,
yet Dr. Robert Miller would say in his book, and some people can look him up too, that it actually sounds like you're saying there's an efficiency in it, even though it flows with the individual.
Yeah, that's right. And you can see that reflected in the results of this study, in that basically Monty's method over 20 days of training was more efficacious because he presented all of his horses at the end of the study. The welfare of those horses, as defined by heart rate within this study, was significantly better than the horses being trained using a more rigid type of approach.
Yeah, fascinating. So thank you, Veronica. That is just amazing. I've never heard it succinctly put in one description like this. I've heard drips and drabs out of it. I hope there's a documentary on this sometime.
That's
because
why
I know
she's a scientist, Debbie.
Oh, she's good, isn't she? That's right. That's right.
I feel smarter in her presence.
or the opposite with me. I'm not kind of like, I don't know anything about this stuff.
Well, this is fascinating. I never knew. I knew that there had been a study done, but I didn't know how it worked. And when they write these things out in science magazines, my eyes tend to glaze over about the second paragraph.
No,
but having Veronica, who's a horse person, explain it to us in accurately, because you were involved in the scientific study, but in layman's terms and horseman's terms, it makes so much sense. I totally get how the study was done and how what the results were and the data that was collected. Fascinating stuff. Gold stars and sparkles.
Yeah. Thank you, Veronica. I do appreciate you just purging that too. And we'll have to have you back on to talk a little bit about what you're doing over there in the UK too, because there's more exciting things coming down the pipeline, I know. And there's more questions that I had on my piece of paper here to ask you too. And we do want to keep up with the direction you're going because we think it advocates for the horses, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, and it provides a channel to access information where you might not necessarily go looking for it. So it's these sorts of interviews that you're doing, I find wonderful because it's a different way of communicating. It's a different way that people access information, and I find it really valuable.
Great. Well, I hope everybody will share Veronica. Tell people about Horsemanship Radio and the Horse Radio Network, and get this information out there so that we can be better for our horses.
Yes.
Thanks very much.
We all hear about omega-3 and how important it is for your horse's nutrition. But why? Well, simply put, horses were created to get all of their nutrition from live, natural grasses. Omega-3 is an essential fat found in many types of live grasses, and it's critical to the horse's health. If they were living on live grasses 24/7, they would be receiving enough omega-3. But in today's world, most horses are fed commercial feed and forage as their primary nutrition, and most of these are lacking in omega-3. That's where Omega Fields comes in. All of Omega Fields' flax-based products provide a balanced, essential profile of omega-3, 6, 9, and may be helpful in alleviating problems related to skin, coat, hoof, joint, and sand colic. One of Omega Fields' terrific products is Omega Horseshine. Omega Horseshine is an omega-3 stabilized ground flaxseed supplement for horses to help maintain a shiny, healthy coat, strong, solid hooves, and top performance for horses in all life stages. Omega Fields provides the best human-grade, non-GMO ground flax that can help horses with dry, scaly, itchy skin, joint pain and inflammation, poor hoof growth, allergies, and more. Don't just listen to Debbie and I. Alexandra, a customer of Omega Fields, says any horse I ever own, I will feed them Omega Horseshine, and I will recommend it to anyone. You can get your Omega Horseshine today at omegafields.com, or just for our listeners, get 15% off using the coupon code Monty2015. All one word, it's Monty2015 for 15% off your next order at omegafields.com. That's omegafields.com.
Monty Roberts needs no introduction to this radio show, but I'd like to put a special slant on what he did to be put in this episode with Dr. Veronica Fowler. Monty Roberts in 1989, as a lot of you might know, was asked to join the Queen over in England at the castle to demonstrate his methods that he had quantified called join up. For him, it was the language of the horse. In actuality, it was a process that he put a young horse who'd never had a saddle bridle rider on, into a 50-foot across round pen and demonstrated how a wild horse can go from gentle and accepting of its first rider in about 30 minutes. It so impressed the Queen that she said, "You must go on tour." And he did that in her car with my mom, Pat Roberts, and with his rider, Sean McCarthy. And they did that for several months and did it for a couple years after that every year. But then she said, there must be a book. And so then the book became The Man Who Listens to Horses, which spent 58 weeks on the New York Times bestsellers list and really revolutionized the way people thought about training horses without pain or violence. And really no one has looked back since. It's changing a 6,000-year-old tradition of training horses with a kinder, more compassionate and humane way.
Well, welcome back. Hi, Monty Roberts. Hi, Dad.
How you doing? You all right?
Yeah, good. We were excited to get you back on because I know you're in the midst of your summer explosion of courses at Flag Gazette Farms, and you've got a lot going on. And you've got Jamie Jennings is coming in for August, and you've got some people coming back for your Gentling Wild Horses course. So some parts are Old Home Week, and some are brand new adventures. So what do we have to look forward to in the Gentling Wild Horses this year?
Well, I never know because they're wild.
Uh-huh.
But they are bringing in quite an array of horses with varying degrees of wildness, all the way from completely Mustang to horses that are just untrained and off the pasture, and so
Yeah.
it's going to be good. And we have one coming from the Queen stables that
A
will
student,
add to it, a
not a
young girl.
horse. Yeah, yeah,
Not a horse, no, a
yeah.
student. Yeah, a
Yeah.
young lady that has shown a tremendous propensity to learn and a desire to get good. So it'll
Fantastic.
be fun.
It is fun. I mean, it was so fun last year, and just a real breakthrough in the courses that you offer. I think too, having the BLM Mustangs, and then Random, who was, some people can listen back on some of those episodes, but he was an amazing abuse
Yeah,
case. Yeah,
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 he was. And we have Joanna Lowe's coming back from
right,
Wales,
right.
and Joanna was on the course. That was the first thing that she did with us last year. And subsequent to that, I had a word with John Whitaker,
Right.
the leading show jump rider of the world. I guess you would say he's the paternal leader of show jump riders, and it's so great to be in this position because I simply said she just would love it if she could come and work for you for a couple of weeks. And he just looked at me and he said, if you recommend her, I'll take her on for a couple of months. And so she's had a chance to start his babies this year, and she's just flying about it. So
Well, she
it's
should be. That's fantastic, and she's so talented. But have you got a progress report with the Whitakers yet?
I got an enormous progress report. John Whitaker said, I'm a man of few words. She is terrific. She's brilliant, he said. So it was, that's a good enough report from me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. She's a good horse. That's fantastic. Well, the reason I wanted to have you on, there's a lot of stuff flying around the social media these days about training. It seems to me there's the camp over here that says stuff cookies down their throats and have no discipline, and then there's the other side of the spectrum, which seems to be get them before they get you, whack them, and then rub it off. It didn't happen, and there's just all kinds of craziness out there, and I know that you believe that horse training has become more transparent, less mysterious in the last 20 some years, but I'm more confused than ever about how people choose trainers. And I'm kind of wondering, do you think this transparency is good for the industry? Or how does the person who's just gone into horses in the last couple of years, how do they find their way?
Well, I think it's terrific for the industry. As you well know, I am not a technical person, and so I don't understand how a telephone can make a video for you and all of that sort of thing. But nothing is hidden these days. Transparency is not only the order of the day, but it's unstoppable. Everybody knows what everybody's doing. It's just incredible. And that's ultimately going to be a good thing, Debbie, because I've said all along that people hid their eyes for 6,000 years, and they just said, bring him to me when he's trained, and, oh, I don't want to see that, and things like that. Well, today, you have to see what's going on. And there will be this disparity. It's an inevitable thing that some people will say, oh, I never want to do anything to him that would cause him to be uncomfortable. And they'll make lapdogs of horses.
Yeah.
That's one mindset that we have to deal with. That's totally unfair to the horse. Absolutely unfair. What you're doing is saying that the horse ought to become more human-like, and we'll just take him out of his own elements and his own instinctual characteristics, and we'll cause him to be a lapdog. And ultimately, it will cost him his life, probably, because he doesn't know how to be a lapdog, doesn't want to be, and shouldn't be. On the other hand, there are still these people, and they're proving that we have a lot of work to do yet, because there's these people that are steadfastly stating that you have to hurt him before he hurts you. If you don't hurt them, they'll eventually attack you and hurt you and all these things. So you got to get a whip and beat them. And they say some horrible things about the comparison of a horse and the children that they would love to beat up too, because every child, particularly the boys, they need a good beating every now and then just to keep them straight. And you and I both know that that isn't the answer. Violence is never the answer. So where is all this? Well, the more transparency you have, the more likely we are to start bringing people to the middle somewhere, making sense and causing common sense to win out in the end. The ones that aren't against discipline of any kind will eventually go to the emergency room and get their cast on and say, I never want to be around horses again. And
that's a shame.
That's probably a good thing. That they're not around horses again. Not a good thing that they have a cast on, but I don't want anybody to be hurt. But I also don't want the horse to get the blame, because horses shouldn't have the blame for anything. They're flight animals, and we must get finished with this blaming them for it. And you're blaming them when you get a whip too. So I'm happy with the way things are going, although I'm totally frustrated with how long it takes to get there.
No. Yeah, you've been at this a while. How long have you been out pounding the clinics? You've been out in public audiences?
I haven't been at it that long.
Okay.
Debbie, I'm 81 years old, and it's only 27 years that I've been taking my case to the public. So I'm a child yet, and I was just this morning working with a man who's a tremendous horseman, I think, and explaining to him the shortcomings that I see in myself and blaming myself for taking so doggone long to learn about these things, because I come up with things that I don't know time after time, and it's exasperating, but it does take time. And the bad news is that it takes a long time to learn. The good news is that if you keep at it, you'll ultimately learn it.
Okay.
So
we just have to keep you healthy is what you're saying, because you're peeling that onion back. But so when you learn something new, is it usually driven by the fact that you've come across a horse that you've just never quite seen before? Or is it that you recognize something in a horse, just serendipity?
If I learn something new, Debbie, it's 99% of the time some horse that finally got through to me. They've been trying to teach us for 6,000 years.
Right.
And really, I mean, it's nature. I don't want to be facetious about it, because they haven't actually consciously been trying to teach us. But their nature, their instinctual behavioral patterns have, in fact, been working on our brain to try to get us to understand them better. And man, we are a tough set of students.
This is why we say horses are such good teachers. I think when people understand that, it's because they are just honest. They're just in the moment telling us what's right for them and what's wrong for them with them, and or for them from you. So I think that's what you mean, is that they're just reacting. That's all they've got. They can't tell a lie. So
and how much better off would we be if none of our teachers could lie? And most of our teachers can lie, and a lot of them do lie. Some of them lie without even knowing they're lying, or else promulgate a falsehood, if you will, even though they think it's probably the way to go. We can be, consciously driven to a particular conclusion without having the evidence to back it up, and that's a lie too, of sorts. Okay. So horses can't do that. They just state their case. And I like to say it's like the child that says, "Mommy, that lady has an ugly dress on."
Oh,
and and the mother will say, "You can't say that." And the child will look at her like, "Why not? It's really ugly. Look at it. It's awfully ugly." But that's the power of childhood, because they have an open brain. And a child of, let's say, 3, 4, and 5 are very horse-like. They're very much like the patterns of behavior that we see in equus.
Because they just act on the moment. Yeah.
Well,
and
they act on the moment, and they have no axe to grind. They just simply don't try to twist the facts. They go with the flow, and I just love it working with horses. It's frustrating to work with a lot of adults that have their own agenda and try to twist things around. It's difficult. And that's the frustration that a lot of people feel, and it drives them to dominate and forcefully attempt to train adults, which we've seen recently in some of these people that just go off the deep end and start talking about beating up children and beating up adults and advocating for the death of adults so that they're not around in the horse business any longer. It's really, it takes me back, it really stops me cold.
It does. It sounds like the 50s, doesn't it? Back to the days when a few trainers were really the gods, and they kind of told you. Do you think that they really do believe that the horse has an agenda? Or is this just anger that it's been taught into them because that's the way their daddy did it?
Well,
they seems to be angry.
Both ways. In England, you say he's taking the mickey. Taking the mickey means he's faking it. He's trying to just get his way by faking it. Yeah, talking about the horse, he's taking the mickey. Over here, we'll say he's just being a jerk, and he needs the hell beat out of him because he's just he doesn't really want this. He's just doing it because that's the way he is. And his mother was the same way, They often will say the mother was the same way. And the mother happened to be trained by the same guy. And they ultimately respond in the same way. And they really do. The mother was the same way. It was human failure that got her that way. Yeah. And in every case, it's human failure. I say every case. I suppose there's 0.1% that are born with some gene for being aggravating, but 99% of all horses are responsive to good training and just as responsive to bad training. One thing gets you good results and the other gets you bad results. And those trainers that are consistently getting bad results, they're doing bad training.
Yeah. So you did something interesting a few weeks ago. You went off to Las Vegas to speak at a conference called Bark Busters. It's a group of trainers of dogs. Why did they invite a horse guy to come talk to a group of dog trainers?
Well, yeah, generally it's the female of the pair, and it was this lady that loves horses too, and read my books and saw a very strong similarity between what they do with dogs and what I do with horses. And she was the one that coaxed the father or the husband into inviting me to come. They have a daughter that loves horses too. So there was an element there that was similar. It turns out that they have created a global organization, a lot of trainers of dogs that are very similar in mindset to what I do. A really nice group of people. And Debbie, they took me on like I was a long-lost son. It was unbelievable how good the response was to the things that I had to say. And you know why it was so good? It was so good because they've heard other horse people saying silly things about using the forceful discipline and stuff like that. And they don't do it with dogs. I don't know what they do, really. But when they say they do not use violence, when they say that they get good results and they build a large organization because they get good results, then they impress me. And so I went to do it. I'm not stepping into the world of dog training, believe me.
Oh, and okay.
No, I'm not trying to tell
At 81, you weren't going to take a little left turn in your career? Or
yeah. Although
Well,
my
good.
wife is going nuts with it.
She is. She's the reining and mom have gone together for the last couple of years. She's doing really well. I'm proud of her,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Amazing.
the raining, yeah, but what about her dog?
Oh yeah, that's true. She has both going.
Oh, she goes to more dog shows now than she does horse shows. It's
Well,
just
that might be
incredible.
true.
But
He's doing pretty well, though.
she found what we'll call a good dog.
Yeah.
and she loved every dog she ever had, and they were good dogs, but this one is pretty special.
He likes the agility. Yeah, he's really good at that too. Yeah. Well, I wanted, before you go, I wanted to tease us a little bit about what you were working on this morning, because this to me is going to blow the lid off a lot of early training with horses. And I think it'll make some longtime trainers sit up and take notice, I think.
Yeah, I'll try to be as lean as I can with this explanation, because it isn't an easy one to explain. But dressage riders will work 2 to 3 years to get a horse to move off their leg. Why do they have to work that long? Because it's the tendency of the horse to go into pressure and not away from pressure. That's what they're born with, and it has to do with canine predators. If they go away quickly from the biting of a flank, the dog just rips the skin and the intestines come out, and the whole pack has lunch. Dogs have to live too, so I'm not being terrible about that, because in the wild, that's the way it is. But anyway, here we go training horses. We ride for 2 or 3 years before we ask a horse to change leads, flying changes, that is, at the canter the full time. And why do we wait that long? Why do the dressage trainers wait that long? Well, they don't start riding them till they're 3 or 4, and then they work that long to get them to change their innate behavior to move off the leg. Then they can push over and change the lead behind. Otherwise, you get disunited, or left lead in front, right lead behind, and vice versa. Mm-hmm. So when you stop to think about it, the Western division, the show jumping and stuff, and you get all the way over to the other end of the spectrum and you come to the racing thing. When does the racehorse get to learn to move off pressure? Well, he doesn't, because the legs never even reach there. If you ride them for 6 years, you still don't teach them to go off pressure. Racehorses don't learn it. So the first time they ever confront pressure into their flanks is when they go in the starting stall and the foot rails in there jab them right in the flanks. Mm-hmm. So they go into that pressure and they lean over and their feet go way off to the side and they look like a 45-degree angle standing in the starting gate. And it is true that 50% of all the racehorses at least lean on the starting gate rails. So if they're leaning there, they have to straighten up before they can start. That costs them 1 length per race. So I've discovered that if we could, at 12 to 14 months of age, if we could teach the horse to move away from pressure with an object of some sort, not to cause pain, but just blunt pressure, if we can teach them to move away from that pressure instead of toward the pressure, and the way that you do that is to reward them by taking the pressure away every time they step away from it. And it takes a while. I had fun this morning with it, and we had 6 or 7 horses that were just seriously into pressure. And convinced this owner of lots of horses that all of his babies ought to be trained to go off pressure. Because then when they go to the starting stalls and they go in, the rail touches them, they come off. I'm only 32 horses into this. This has just been taught to me in the last 90 days or so. And
and who did the teaching?
Stupid. What?
Who did the teaching? The horses.
The horses? The horses did. Well, we had a filly over there in England, belongs to Her Majesty the Queen, and she was so into pressure, it was unbelievable. She was a nuclear bomb about it.
Yeah.
And she had injuries to a lot of people before I ever met her. But she learned quickly, and then we put her in the starting stalls, and she bumped each side a little bit and then stood in the middle, and we opened the gate, and out she goes. So I think I'm on the right track, and I'm 32 horses into it, and I need to be 3,000 horses into it before I know for sure. But I'm working hard. I want to go to Lexington, Kentucky, and I want to have a meeting with the Farm Managers Association and show them these things. It'll be fantastic.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you that was more than just a little thumbnail. Thank you. It made sense, I think, in
Can you say groundbreaking? Can you say this is like the best thing to happen to racing since the starting gate?
Yeah,
This is yeah, and remember that I rode out of a starting gate in 1944. It was a Model T, that's for sure, a terrible thing, and they were just experimenting with it at the time. But I personally rode through a starting gate in races in 1944. By 46, we had the electric one that's powered by batteries, and so all the gates flew open at the same time. And I rode in 46, 47, 48, and I started getting too big in 48, 49. But anyway, I know starting gates like the back of my hand, or I thought I did. And it's so stupid of me not to figure out that they should have been trained off the rails all this time. And I am the number one man.
They've always had rails in them, right? They the world over.
Always had rails in them. Yeah, and I am the first name of a living modern day horse handler that you'll find if you go to that Wikipedia or Google starting gate. I'm the first name. I didn't know that till yesterday. It's incredible. I didn't even know I was in there at all. But there I am, because I have done more horses globally than anybody else, and I'm the inventor of this protective blanket. But remember that's fixing the problem after the fact.
That's right.
The blanket protects them from the rails. But they don't need protection from the rails if they don't want to fight the rails. So if we train them early not to fight the rails, yes, it'll be the breakthrough measure adopted by the racing industry that will be number one, in my opinion, since racing started.
Boom. There we go. Yeah, no, I can't wait to actually put this in the hands of like a Trevor Denman and some of these people who have influence, and Kentucky, and get you on the road with that, because that is a gift. That is a total gift to the industry.
And I got a cold shower this morning because our camera lady, who does all of our lessons and stuff, she says, "Oh, you get ready. They're going to come after you because you've got that cane with a tennis ball on the end of it. You've got that cane, and they're going to think you're beating this horse up when you do this." And all it's a cane that I place on the flank of the horse, and they come into it with a tennis ball on the end of it, so it can cause no pain. It's blunt pressure.
Just pushes, yeah.
Yeah, and
it's like
and
the heel of your boot.
It's
very much like the heel of your boot, really. If you push, if you could push that hard with the heel.
Yeah, if you could push that hard, and so they'll push into you and push you over, and maybe even kick you, because it's what they've learned to do to survive from the canine attack.
Right.
But anyway, when they step away, you take it away and you reward them. And give them a stroke, and then you go to the other side and do the same thing. And it takes 3 to 6 sessions with this 32 that I've done. 3 to 6 sessions, you've got it. They will step away with just a touch. But they just have to be shown that that's where they get the reward.
Yeah, that's it. Fantastic. Thanks for that tip. Got any next week? Well, any other discoveries that will change the world? Just we're here. We're here to record them.
Well, horses,
thank you for that.
It's that they tell me there's over 7,000 equine science courses around the world now, and we haven't found one course that has a module on into pressure. And to me, it's the most important characteristic that the equine has in terms of learning how to train them. It is a negative, that's for sure, but all they have to do is be shown that there's another way, and they'll adopt the new way if that's where they get the reward.
Right. Proven, because people have been changing leads and doing different things in training forever, where we'll get the horse to adapt the into pressure to us. We don't ask them to do it the other way around. So that's already a proven concept. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I'll let you get back at it. I know you've got more work to do today.
We do. Yeah, we have a lot more work to do today. And it's hot in California.
It's really hot here in the middle of summer. Thanks, Dad. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you at Mounting Special Training. next week.
Give my best to all 6 listeners.
Yeah, thanks. Well, shh.
How many listeners do you have?
How many do we have, Jennifer?
Oh, you're asking the wrong gal. There are the lots. We just have lots and lots of listeners. More than 6.
I think that,
Well,
more than 6. I think at last, we can cut all this out. At last, the graphs and things that Glenn sends me, I think it's 40,000.
Oh, that's good. That's a bigger audience than I've ever had. Well, let me just tell you that I'm so excited about this that I want the world to know about it. And I knew that you had more than 6 listeners. But even if you didn't, if it was just 6, I would be happy because I'm able to start the ball rolling to get it out there. And it's incredible how these things get hidden for so long, and now I'm able to bring it out, and I'm rehearsing on you as to how to present it.
I know.
You know what I think is really funny? This whole conversation began with transparency in the culture, the equestrian culture, and depending upon who came upon this light bulb moment, if we use a blunt object to gently put pressure on a horse and teach him that moving away from the pressure is a reward at an early age, he will start from the gate better, and he will also start from the gate with less stress. Depending upon who came across that may have been also hidden away, and the only people who would know about it were certain people, because that would give them an advantage at the track. But because you discovered it, everybody gets to know.
Well, exactly, and I discovered it at a time when the technical aspects of our lives will allow it for a lot of people to know. And think how many horses will be improved in their life by it.
Especially the ones that have the meltdowns. Those horses are a lot more likely to have a successful life.
Whisper the language of the herd. Listen, you don't have to say a word.
It's time for Jamie Jennings to fetch an email from Monty Roberts' inbox and share a morsel of Monty's wisdom in a little segment we like to call Ask Monty.
Leave this world a better place than mine. The magic in the language of the herd.
Dear Monty, my Western horse's gait is rough. How can I appear to have a good seat in the show ring? Monty's answer. There are 2 major factors involved when it comes to presenting a pleasing appearance on a Western horse while sitting at the trot. They are the gait of the horse and the ability of the rider. Third, there is a minor facet, and that is the equipment that is used. While the gait of the horse is inherent property, there are things we can do to modify it. When a Western horse trots in a rough pounding fashion, he is typically far worse the faster you trot. If one can concentrate on training your horse to trot very slowly, the roughness is reduced dramatically. The rider can improve the look of the trot by carefully studying all of the factors involved in sitting smoothly while trotting. The rider's ankles usually play a significant role in acting as shock absorbers at this gait. The knees, thigh muscles, and certainly waist and upper body can all be trained to provide a judge with a more aesthetically pleasing picture. Equipment, while a relatively minor factor, can also come into play in an effort to cause the trot to look smoother. A very low cantle will generally accentuate the bouncing motion of the rider's posterior. A saddle that is slightly more elevated in front and rear will help a rider to appear more comfortably nestled at the trot. Loose clothing with fringy projections would tend to accentuate the trot. Even the hairdo will sometimes magnify the roughness of the horse's gait or cause it to seem smoother. A Western saddle that has a deep, softly padded seat will allow for a smoother looking ride than a sleek, hard leather one. It should be sure that all loose saddle strings and other appointments to the saddle are firmly fixed in place so that you see less movement as you view the overall picture. One should be ever mindful of the fact that a firm, fit, healthy human body is far easier to present as attractive while riding than a body that is out of shape. Fitness has nothing but positives to offer humans and horses alike. Fit individuals tend to live longer and have healthier and happier lives.
For more of these insights into good horsemanship, go to www.montyroberts.com and click on the orange banner that says Get Free Horse Tips.
Hi, I'm Monty Roberts, and I'm dedicated to training horses without pain. You can learn to do it too on my Equus Online University. Western, English, the beginner, or the advanced rider. It doesn't matter. You can connect with other students online too, on our forum, and there's a new lesson every week. It's a lifetime of learning for you on my Equus Online University at montyroberts.com.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
Where in the world is Monty Roberts?
Monty is looking forward to meeting some new friends, two-legged and four-legged, back at Flag Is Up Farms on September 24-25. It's coming up fast. The Riding with Respect. It's a weekend at Flag Is Up Farms where you get to either bring your own horse or use one of the willing partners' horses and to learn what join-up is like in the saddle. And then Monty gets on an airplane, flies over to England for, they're calling it the Living Legend Tour. He's worried about that a little bit. Why do I have to be a living legend? Of course I'm living. So October 15th, he'll be in Lancashire. October 21, he'll be in Hartpury. October 26th, he'll be in Surrey. October 29, Devon. November 3rd, East Yorkshire. And then November 5th, he finishes up in Lincolnshire. He is all over the map. And we're really happy to be on our 25th year of touring in England.
I got a quick question. Riding with Respect. Does someone who's interested in going to the Riding with Respect class, is there a prerequisite that you have to have attended before you do that one?
No, that's what's so wonderful about it. We don't even know who's going to show up, but we do gather a little information when they register, like their size. I know that's always a fun question, but we have to match them with an appropriate size
If
horse.
you're 5'2", you don't want a 16.5 hand horse.
You don't need one. Yeah. And if it's a big old guy who's 6'2", we'd like to have a little wither under him, so
you don't want to be sitting on a 14-hand pony. Yeah.
No, that wouldn't be right. So fortunately we have a range of horses here, and some people have opted to bring their own horses too. So that's all good. And no, we meet who we have at the gate, and we're happy to. It's been incredible, all levels too. But do you remember that not everybody understands down to the ground what join up looks like in the saddle. And Monty's won 9 World's Championships. So he can go cross disciplines with whatever saddle. He always says a horse is a horse. It doesn't really matter what kind of girth or cinch or saddle you're putting up top there. But this is in the saddle where there's no bareback pads. That's the only rule.
So this is in the saddle work for, it's open to riders of English or Western disciplines.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Whether you are a professional rider or an amateur rider.
Absolutely.
Whether you have your own horse to bring along or would like to use one of the willing partners' horses.
That's right, because we have people come from all over the world for this.
Mm-hmm. And this thing is available to anybody who wants to sign up, and you can get all the details at montyroberts.com. Am I right?
That's right.
That's right. Or if you want to get more information from a real, live, and friendly human being, you can call 805-688-6288. And for details about today's show, you can go to horsemanshipradio.com, and we will have links to today's topics as well as photos and more information about our guests. And we love your feedback. Help us make this show better. We want to find out what you want us to talk about. You can go to Facebook at Monty Roberts. Just go to Facebook and put the little search bar at the top, Monty Roberts. Or you can go on Twitter and follow Monty on Twitter. Does he tweet while he's in England, or does he have someone tweet for him?
I do all the tweeting out, but it's his, he either says put a quote in there or tell him where I am or whatever. So I actually push the buttons, but he's very involved.
There we go. If you can follow him on Twitter. It's Monty_Roberts. Mm-hmm. And you can get the app to have the Horsemanship Radio Show as well as all the other cool shows on your phone with you wherever you go. It's for iTunes or Android. Just go to your app store and search Horse Radio Network. You can download it. It's free and easy to use.
Yes, do that. That is the best way, you guys. And it's always in your face there as soon as you look down at the phone. And that's what I do, killing time all the time. I use it all the time because I'm in the car a lot too.
Yeah,
so
it's a great way to while away the hours on your commutes, isn't it?
Oh, I'm telling you, because I do that 3-hour commute each way, each week. Yeah, it's bad. Oh, it's just by LAX. It's not bad traffic at all. Pah! No, it's bad. So, and I make sure we thank our sponsors there who make us happen. And it's IFA.com, it's Omega Fields, and it's MontyRobertsUniversity.com. And be sure to visit all the other great shows too on the Horse Radio Network at www.horseradionetwork.com. But girlfriends, until next time, have many happy horse hours.